Hey guys, welcome back to the Intentional Living Podcast. I'm your host, Kenzie, and today I've got my husband, Josh, on again.
Yes, ma'am.
He's back, the favored one of the two. Today we're going to recap some of our wedding stuff and talk about what the first almost 3 months of marriage have been like. Because, we've got all the wisdom because we've got it all figured out in this short period of time. I don't know why anybody said marriage takes work.
No learning to do in our marriage anymore.
Yes. So I believe you've got some questions, babe. So I'm going to let you take it away. Just get right into it.
Yeah, just get right into it. So one of the things that we kind of talked about wanting to introduce when when you have guests on the podcast is asking them, how have you lived intentionally these last couple days?
I love that question. I'm glad that we will be able to continue to use that with future guests. But for me this week, I would say, unfortunately, living intentionally has been slacking in my life recently, coming out of holidays and just getting back into the swing of things. And so going to be striving to live intentionally this week. But I will say, specifically incorporating prayer throughout my day and letting the Lord be involved in the little snippets of the day rather than, even though I haven't been super great with fully giving him my quiet time or something like that, allowing it to be a part of the little parts of the day has been something I've been intentional with the last few days.
Yeah, I mean, it's been an off week with the holidays and everything, so kind of understands getting out of routine a little bit there. But
also, side note, for those of you who are watching, please excuse our gigantic puppy that's laying on the floor.
Right at my feet.
Yes, facial awareness whatsoever. And very clingy.
No kidding.
How have you been living intentionally?
Thank you for asking. I hope you don't cut that part out. That was
that's the real deal.
Yeah. I've been living intentionally. I've really been making it a priority for myself to be cleaning up more around the house. Not that I'm a messy person, but it's not the first thing I think of, and I've been working on that more. So I've been picking up after myself immediately. I'll cook dinner, eat dinner, and then immediately go to clean the kitchen rather than letting it be something I worry about later in that night or the next day. It's the first thing I end up doing afterwards. So I'm now doing that. I'm intentionally doing that for myself because it's less stress on her by keeping a cleaner place. So I think that's something I've definitely been doing to live intentionally. Husband of the Year award right here, just by the way. And then also I think spiritually, didn't really get in my word a lot this week, again, with the holidays and stuff, or right around this time. But I did get to drive to work at the butt crack of dawn and see the sunrise, and got to listen to worship music, watching a sunrise while I was driving into work in my rear view. And it was really cool. It was a really cool, just peaceful way to start my day, getting to just hear worship music and say some prayers for our friends who are down in Passion right now, and just praying for family and friends around this time. Yeah, just really getting to experience that. That was that was kind of intentional for me. I felt like I really did that to make that happen. So
that's awesome. Yeah, I love that, babe. That's really cool.
Yeah. Thanks
for sharing that.
Of course. So kind of now diving into the wedding recap. Why are we wanting to talk about your wedding for everybody to kind of know?
I would say because leading into the wedding, it was really important for me, honestly, above everything, that I just wanted a day where the Lord's presence was felt. And I also knew that we had a lot of friends and family that don't know the Lord and a lot that do and all of that. And it was just very much, I wanted a day that the Lord could just be undeniable and his hand in our story and everything like that. And that was what it was. I just wanted to have the opportunity to get to elaborate on that and get to share how special that day really was. So, yeah.
I mean, even just before we kind of dive into what the day looked like for us, I do think it is so important in a wedding, like you were saying, having Jesus, having the Lord present there with us. That was a huge part of the day. I mean, it kind of was the difference of make or break the day, honestly. Obviously, the wedding day is still going to be a good day. You're still going to enjoy it. But, if you have the ability to having God in your relationship bringing him in such a way. And for instance, sitting up there, getting to pray together at the altar, and then building a unity cross like this right behind us, it was a reminder to us that no matter what happens in the day could be, everything could go wrong. The DJ could show up to the wrong location. The food could be cold, whatever it may be. The dance, it could have been freezing or raining that day. But no matter what it was still going to be our wedding day. And it was something that, was so beautiful because the Bible describes it that way. And God shows us that marriage is something that he designed for a reason and made into
Right.
like this holy and amazing thing, because it represents his love for us and for the church. And the best way to represent that is the love that a husband has for a wife and the love that a wife has for a husband. And that was something that we just had to do some introspection in and realize that that day was more than just about us, even though it might have been
all the other things were gifts, whatever.
I wonder what
were gifts to the day
Yep.
versus that was not what the day was about. So yeah, he keeps saying that it was my wedding because I messed up a few times and said it was my wedding instead of our wedding. Now I will never live it down.
I was the guest of honor. I mean, can you believe it? I got to stand up there with her. I mean, at her wedding.
Invited this guy.
But yeah, I mean, kind of transitioning in, I think, obviously weather was perfect. Thankfully, we didn't have any latecomers show up, which was awesome.
That we know of, but that's how it should be.
Nobody walked.
We didn't have to know all the nitty gritty details of the day. What I want to share of the wedding day was the specific tangible ways that I do recall the Lord's hand. If you don't mind me taking over for a second.
Oh, not at all.
Going to the night before our wedding where we had our rehearsal. If anybody knows me, they know that I very much do like to plan. I very much do like to control, let's be honest. That's something I always have to keep in check and try to surrender and all of that. And so I'm very much a planner, like to, nitpick the day or all the things. But my prayer big time was for this wedding weekend to be like, this is the one time that you and I will get to be served and we get to just sit back and rest and relax and soak it in, and everybody's coming because they want to celebrate us. And I was just praying for the ability to be present and not get caught up in the details and get caught up in the stress. And I didn't want that weekend to fall by the wayside. I wanted to remember everything. So I remember praying for that. And also, if anybody knows me, they know my love language is words of affirmation. So the night before the wedding, basically we had a rehearsal dinner and rehearsal run through. And I remember the amount of people that came to that and were able to be there hands-on and help, and that were willing to be there. We had so many people want to be there for our ceremony, rehearsal, and reception setup. And I just remember being like, oh my gosh, I feel so surrounded and loved. So many people were just there. And so we went and had our ceremony rehearsal, which was super whirlwind. I can't believe we're actually doing this, having our wedding rehearsal. What the heck? And in that entire time, it only took a few times for us to practice and run through it. But by the time we were done, we went back to the reception venue and everything was done. It was perfect the way I completely dreamed. And I didn't even have to necessarily give that much information. It was just so cool how all the details that I had conveyed, yes, prior, but not even necessarily. It was just everybody knew us so well, knew what we were desiring, made it happen. And it happened during the time that we were doing our practice. And it was just so cool how we just walked in and it was like, wow, everybody took the time and did this, and they did it so intentionally and so to what we desired. And I just remember feeling that night, what the heck? How is this happening? How are we this blessed? And then afterwards, we went to dinner with everybody who came to help and who's a part of the ceremony and all of that stuff. And with my love language being words of affirmation, this was just so special to me because we had an open mic at our rehearsal dinner, and anyone who wanted to get up and say some words about us or just anything that we've meant to them or what they wanted to encourage us, anything, got up and spoke, and I will just remember that night forever. That was just so special, getting to hear our parents, our siblings, grandparents, friends, like everything that everybody had to share was just so, so special to me. And that
Yeah.
was definitely one of the main things too, where I experienced the Lord that weekend. And just that He knows me and us so well that that would mean so much to us. We were able to hear how some of what the Lord has done in our lives, like, has impacted other people. And they would get up and share that in front of friends and family. And my parents specifically getting up and announcing and declaring the healing that has gone on in our family and with you. It was so good, so cool. I
Yeah.
will remember that forever.
Yeah.
I loved that evening.
I think it was that open mic definitely made the evening almost.
Yeah.
It really, obviously, amazing people helped set up. Walkthrough was perfect. We got it down pretty quickly. Our wedding coordinator and the pastor both did a great job making
Yeah.
sure everything ran smoothly.
Oh, she literally made the weekend
Yeah. So
far
easy.
beyond my dreams
Mhm.
because of all that she did. Anyways,
But then putting all that aside, I mean, you sit down, you got a great dinner in front of you, great people around you, you're getting to talk with people, and yet still we're the people that are being celebrated. And somehow it felt like everybody who got up and spoke, and even the people who didn't, the words they said were almost worth celebrating too. Everybody said such amazing things. There were people who prepared speeches and multiple people who didn't, and they just felt drawn to get up there and say something for us and about us. It was just so impactful. So to anybody who is listening to this and hearing us say this, if we didn't get a chance to thank you already, thank you for
yes,
doing that.
for real.
That was huge for us, and that meant so much. And just hearing everybody say these things, because sometimes, you wonder if you're making an impact in people's lives, the way you're living, how deep does it go? And so, to have so many people stand up there and just show the impact that we've made, it just meant
Definitely.
so much. And the life that we led, it draws other people to want to live that. It's just amazing.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
That was so special. And then I remember for me the next day, something so sweet about the weekend too was just my final moments with my parents and family as a Hinks, and reflecting on that, and just, you don't realize how much that's going to hit you until it happens. Of, oh my gosh, I won't have this last name anymore after this weekend, and what it means to be a part of your maiden name family or whatever.
Yeah.
And so just getting to have that time with my family was super, super sweet. And then waking up the next morning, I had all of my bridesmaids and what I called pit crew, which was like my secondary bridesmaids. I don't know where that name came from, but we all had a sleepover at my family's house the night before. So it was really special to get to wake up with all of them the next day. And I just remember so tangibly that whole day, my prayer coming into fruition of just having the ability to be present for the day. And I wish this wasn't the case. This is something I would love to have more in my life, is being present more often. But I don't know that I can recall many other days where I can truly go back and remember every step of the day. But the wedding day was that. I was so present and just can almost, we're not going to give you a play-by-play, but like I could give you a play-by-play. And that's just crazy to me, because that's just normally not how I normally can function. And so the Lord really did answer that prayer. And it was just incredible how I was just able to sit and soak in the atmosphere, everybody that was there wanting to do what they were doing for us, everybody that wanted to come celebrate and see this union, feeling the Lord's presence there, enjoying all the elements of the day, like from the weather, from the company, from the hanging out, from the activities we were doing, from the nerves that hit me like a freight train when I was about to walk down the aisle, from the surrealness that we were actually husband and wife. I hope it stays fresh because I was just so present.
I couldn't agree more. Obviously our days looked very different. You had your girls stay the night. My guys were all kind of spread out throughout Kansas City, so I didn't try to do that, but we all went for breakfast that next morning, the wedding morning, and stopped at a little diner, grabbed some breakfast, which was amazing. Drove down to the venue, set up a disc golf basket, actually played some putting games for like 2 hours because why not? Watched college football because why not? There was some great games that weekend. Of course, some of the best matchups had to be on October 12th. Unfortunately, that's why our days look very differently as guy versus girl. Just fun stuff. But I think the big thing for me of what stood out to me on our wedding day was just how impactful we were. I kind of said this already with the friends going up and speaking, but having that many people show up for our wedding day made me realize, looking out while we were standing up at the altar, I was like, all of these people are here to celebrate us. That was just crazy to me. And then as we got introduced into the reception hall, it was so cool to see everybody stand up or sitting down, clapping for us, cheering. And as we walked through, it was just crowded. It was awesome. And I just could not believe that that was for us. I mean, that was huge to me.
Right.
So many people said that, like, obviously our ceremony, our vows spoke a lot about wanting to live the biblical role that is, I guess I'll say, prescribed to us by God in the Bible in marriage. And, you know, we both touched on that and wanting to say that. And we both kind of showed the impact that God had on the other person through us to each other. Just the amazing impact. I'm sure this will be something you probably dive into later too, but I mean, just having the ability to learn more about what the biblical role of marriage is something that's huge, and having the connotation that it's supposed to have, bringing that into our wedding ceremony and showing it in such a loving way made an impact on so many people there. I mean, there was just so many people that said the ceremony was beautiful, the words were beautiful, the prayers were beautiful, the message our pastor gave was beautiful. That was just amazing to me. Like, it was just something that you take everything else from the day aside and you set the 200 people that were there, us up there at the front, and just showing God in our relationship, and then our pastor and officiant doing the exact same thing when we weren't talking, showing God and our relationship and how it's a 3 chords braided together. Yeah, that was definitely the big thing for me. So obviously wedding day was awesome. Everything went perfectly. Dance party was great. We had so much fun. Send-off was amazing. Something I've got wrote down is just a little bit of the honeymoon. Obviously, we're not going to dive into it.
Go back for a second.
Oh, yeah, of
I
course.
would like to elaborate why we say the wedding day is perfect too, though, because in like reality, it wasn't perfect. Like everything we discussed and our entire vision to the T did not happen. But the reason why it was perfect is because I feel like you and I both got to a place of surrendering our control over that day, like getting to a point where this is our one and only wedding day. We trust the people that are wanting to serve us and help us in this. And we've been so blessed in that. Lord, this is your day, because ultimately being married is a representation of what the Lord has done for us. And so, yes, it's our wedding day, but it's not about us. It's about what God's done in the relationship and about what he's done in general for his people to show that demonstration of marriage and what it is. And getting to that point of whatever happens today, you're here. This is your day. Your presence is here. I want your presence here. I want to be present for the day. And that's why it was perfect. It's because that happened. The Lord answered those prayers. He met us in that day. He was tangibly there the whole day, just in all the details, in all the relationships, and all the people around, all the things. It was just, he was there. And that's why it was perfect, because that's why it's important. And I would encourage any bride that's about to get married too, is don't let yourself get caught up in the details, because that isn't what it's about. And they're not all going to happen the way that you want them to. Like, they're not, you can't focus so much on the details that you let yourself get disappointed if something goes wrong, because I'm so thankful for the people that were there that day and taking care of stuff for us and serving us that day, because it was so sweet. There were several things that actually went wrong per se that day. I didn't even have to have a clue of.
We had no idea until
Yeah.
like a week later.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's how it should be. And that was such a gift. And that was so special because it was, I just got to be present. And truly, my experience was just the best day ever. And I would not have changed anything about it, even though finding out later, this and this happened. Okay.
Yeah.
It was just so special. That's why we call it a perfect day.
Yeah.
Not because anyone's day will actually be perfect because of structure or because of plans. That's not achievable. It's perfect because the Lord ordained that day. The Lord was there that day. And the Lord carried us through that day and gifted us that day. That's why it's perfect.
You shouted out, I will say, you shouted out brides. Quick shout out to also bridesmaids, groomsmen, the wedding party.
Yeah.
Take the load off their hands. Do not let the groom and the bride do anything. If there's a problem, you don't take it to them. Take it to somebody else, and then you all try to figure out how to solve it. Because that was something that we avoided, because when there was an issue, it didn't get brought to us. It got brought to our wedding coordinator. And so kind of pick somebody for maybe day of. They kind of know where things are supposed to be set up or when people are supposed to be where. Obviously, like when we were walking, stuff like that. Like, let somebody deal with that and go to them with the problems. And then the bride and groom have no clue. Then the wedding coordinator will be like, oh, yeah, by the way, a couple of these things happened, but it's funny to laugh at now.
Yep.
Exactly.
Yeah, I agree. I do want to say, too, that one of my most favorite moments of the wedding was our entire reception. I always said I wanted a party, a dance party. And that was one of the biggest things that I wanted for in a wedding. And we got that, and it was so much fun. But I remember my 3 favorite moments were our first slow song played after a bunch of party songs did. And poor guy, I wasn't even giving him a lick of my attention because I was just looking around the whole room and seeing everybody else paired up, dancing with either their spouse or somebody in their family or their best friend or whatever, and just seeing everybody paired off, and I was like, oh my gosh.
I mean, I'm sitting there, I'm trying to look in the eyes of my new bride and soak in the magic of our first slow dance.
I'm like,
besides our first dance, obviously, but our first dance on the dance floor with everybody out there with us. And she's like, look at everybody dancing. Look at the lights. This is amazing.
But it was so sweet to just see everybody, the joy in everyone else's faces with whoever they were with, but also like because they were at our wedding and they were enjoying themselves and they were at peace and they were experiencing the joy of the day. Like, it was just so special. And that, like, obviously I wanted to enjoy our day and I wanted us to have fun.
Yeah.
Like, I also, one of my biggest prayers of that day too is that like everybody else would love being there and it would be a joy for them to be there. And so getting to see that in like everybody's faces, all the smiles, all the laughs, all the just pure joy and silliness and goofiness, because there was a lot of that. But all of that going on was just so special. I'll never forget that moment either, just scanning the room. It was like a movie. And then we had other movie moments where he and I had, anyone getting married, I would highly recommend doing this, a private last dance where everyone had left to go set up for our send-off before, but then we had our photographer and our videographer and our DJ start us off. DJ played our song, and then our photographer and videographer got a couple clips and snapshots of us dancing, but then even they left the room, and we had the entire venue to ourselves and just had a private last dance, and that was just the coolest way to cap the day off of just, whoa, we just did that. What the heck? And then also having that sweet moment of picking the song that means so much to you. And then having that time to just be like, wow, we really did this. Now we're about to go off and start our life together. And this was just the coolest day ever. So that was such a special moment. And I, like I said, would highly recommend anyone getting married to do that. But then right after that, we went into our sparkler send-off is what we had. And that was, I just say, the private last dance into the send-off was truly, if I could classify a moment in my life as a movie, that was it. Because it was so surreal. Didn't even feel real, but just looking, it was beautiful. It was so cool. But also all the people that came that day and stayed and were, again, the joy was felt. Everybody was cheering for us. So many people just getting to walk through all the people that were like, we love Kenzie and Josh enough and we love their relationship enough that we came out here to support them and be a part of this union and this huge life-changing step and send them off into their new lives together.
Mm.
Oh, it was just so cool. And so all of that moment into leaving, I was just an emotional mess. I was like, oh, this is so crazy. But yeah, I just wanted to say those were just such special moments of the day and truly the gifts from the Lord of the day that I will always remember so vividly because it was just so special. I loved our wedding.
Yeah.
It was so cool.
It was.
And I love hearing how much other people loved our wedding.
Mm.
I mean,
That's been
more than anyone will know.
Yeah.
Truly. We had the best time. It was so
We
cool.
did.
Anyways, now we can move on.
Okay, not much to talk about with honeymoon wise. I mean, we went on a cruise. It was awesome. Got to have a lot of fun. Got to explore some new places. But something we kind of wanted to talk about was we had a lot of downtime there because sometimes, out in the ocean, hurricane season, we had some bad weather.
We literally went around
We
the
had
hurricane.
3 days at sea before we even got to our first destination. So it was kind of, there was a lot of relaxing, a lot of travel, but it was.
And we went to Miami early, so we had even more unwanted rest time there because we couldn't even go to the beach. There was 50-mile-per-hour winds.
Mhm.
So it was just rest.
Yeah. Picture that kid at the beach throwing a bunch of sand at you, and then just try picturing that, but a lot harder. So it was very annoying. But kind of wanted to open up a little bit is what it means to really let your mind be still while on a vacation or just in general. What did it mean? We realized after that, though we might have had a lot of downtime, we didn't do, obviously we say we didn't do anything exciting. We were in the middle of the ocean and getting to explore tropical islands. But
And we just got married, if you know what I mean.
Cut that out. But it was like we obviously intentionally had to be okay with letting ourselves be still. We're both very much busybodies. We like doing things that makes us busy. I like going out exploring nature, and Kenzie likes cleaning and keeping clutter off the ground. I'm kidding. But it was like intentionally letting us sit there in the presence. What did that mean to you, and how did you have to kind of cope with that?
Well, it's funny that you're asking me this question because, as you know, since you were the one there, it took me a minute to get okay with that because coming out of the wedding and the prepping weeks before and everything like that, we didn't leave for our honeymoon until like 4 days after the wedding, but the 2 days after we went and stayed at a hotel. So we had rest days after the wedding. And I was like, this is going to be great. We need this because obviously had so much going on the last few weeks. It was going to be good to have rest time. And so I was like, okay, we had that. We got caught up. I really feel like we had the time to vibe on sleep and just chilling and all the things. I was really excited for this trip because, yes, we would still get to relax, obviously, on vacation, but I also was excited to go to the beach and be outside all day and get to explore and get to see things. And I was hoping going to Miami, we could actually go out and do things. But lo and behold, one, I didn't do enough research on where we were staying and the weather was not cooperating. So I would just say that the Lord had other plans in that regard of what our honeymoon is going to look like. And I would say I almost spent a little bit of it in frustration because I am not a restful person at all. Like busy, sometimes too busy, and don't know how to rest or to rest efficiently. Sometimes I rest almost lazily. Like I'll sit down when I shouldn't be sitting down. And then when I should, I don't know how to do that, if that makes sense. So picked up on very quickly after the first few days of realizing that we weren't going to be able to go out and do the things like we thought we would. We didn't have access to anything other than basically eating and laying around while we were in Miami and then getting on to the boat and with it having a hurricane and the rough waters, and we didn't book very many excursions and all that. So it was just a whole lot of relaxing. But in the trip, I kind of had the epiphany of like, obviously this is for a reason. I remember telling you, I think in Miami, the Lord must be telling me that I need to rest because this is like hard smack. Like, get the point. You need to rest. This is like the one time in a long time that you're going to have the ability to do this and soak it up. Throughout the honeymoon, I would say I learned that more of what it did mean to actually rest productively, compartmentalizing what resting means just being lazy and doing nothing, but actually like resting with the Lord and with you and soaking in that time of we were resting because this is the time that we will never get back. We were on a new trip right at the beginning of being husband and wife. It was so much quality time, so much intentional time, so much having that time to just be with each other and soak in what just happened, what the wedding was, and all of that. So having that time to rest, I realized was the Lord was giving that to us for a reason, because I couldn't imagine. It's almost like that's how our honeymoon needed to be, because, you and I don't get trips like that very often,
Yeah,
too. Like,
exactly.
we are a more adventurous type of couple. And we do want to go explore things. And it was like, you need this time because you're processing all of this that just happened, and you're spending this intentional time together and starting your marriage off on the right foot. And even though I didn't want that necessarily going into it and was almost a little bit frustrated, I quickly realized, okay, obviously the Lord's trying to tell us something here. And the rest turned out to be so refreshing. And we embraced it. Once we realized that was what we were going to get, we embraced it. It was honestly, other than the fact that we went through a hurricane and the waters were rough, that was not fun. But other than that, it was truly just the most special honeymoon, just to get to be with each other.
Yeah, 100%. I really couldn't have said it better, honestly. It was just, I was learning more so, a little bit of learning on my side, but also trying to help Kenzie understand too that it's okay that we aren't doing anything. It's okay that we're sitting in our room and watching TV. It's okay that we're going up on the lounge deck and just laying there on some beach chairs. It was just one of those things that was like, we knew it was going to be a very still week. But
That's a good word.
we also knew that,
Still.
we knew it was going to be a still week and not still waters. But it was very relaxing, very peaceful. As we've said multiple times, it was much needed.
It was what we didn't know we needed.
I mean, I brought the book I'm reading, or started reading on the honeymoon, basically. Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis. Great book, by the way. Basically, it was like being still every morning. I got to wake up, sit on our balcony, and read at least a chapter of it, if not two, just by myself, and get to sit there, pray on it, read those, and just learning more. So the being still part was definitely part of it. Besides the watching TV and just laying around and not doing much when we were on the boat, it was the ability to, even when we were kind of on a break from the world, not being on a break from God, getting to sit there and read that book, pray on the book, have conversations about it. I mean, it led to multiple conversations between us. It was really awesome.
And I would say rest is something that I've always struggled with. It's almost like I have to be forced into it.
That could be another podcast episode
Yes.
itself right there.
And I'm very much a work in progress when it comes to rest. I'm not very good with rest, and I'll be the first to admit that.
I mean, even God day off.
I know.
Now,
discovering what that fully means has been hard for me. And so, like I said, it's also cool that like the Lord does know me well enough to know that like it had to be forced. Just was forced to rest that week, and then it resulted in a lot of beautiful things. And so that was really cool. But truly, rest is something that I would love to grow in more and understand the right and wrong way to rest, because there is a right and a wrong way to rest. And yeah.
So that's all I've got.
I do want to also share our story a little bit more.
So, I guess our story a little bit. Met in 8th grade. I moved out of the suburbs, countryside kind of living. She lived just down the street, and the friend group, everybody lived all within a mile of each other, almost. Yeah, so we met in 8th grade, all rode the same bus, called it the bus family. We rode the short bus. Don't make fun, but it was a kind of where I guess we got to really know each other. We were friends all through high school in the same friend group, hanging out all the time in the same friend group. And then suddenly I came back after freshman year, went what I thought at the time was finding myself, was not finding myself, but did some much needed growing up in the sense of leaving my family and leaving friends and learning to make new in a new place. And that was definitely something I needed to go through. Walked away from going to church, walked away from God, basically. Considered myself still a Christian, but was definitely living very much oh, I'm in college now. Let's take advantage of life while I got it kind of thing. So definitely not the ideal scenario, but again, obviously I had some living I needed to do and get those immaturities out of the way because, man, did I need to grow up a little bit. But rekindled the friendship with her after a year and a half of not talking. And thankfully, she had just become recently single. So, of course,
It was a rare occasion for me.
I'm a very flirty guy, love flirting, and Kenzie's very straightforward and does not know how to flirt. So, obviously, it was the perfect pairing for us. And, that summer we rekindled a friendship. She was single, and we started dating just in that fall as I went back to K-State. Got to know each other more. Doing long distance, we were FaceTiming, calling a lot. We were not
Living
by any means were we living what a godly relationship could have been.
And you'll see my side
yeah.
of where I got to where I was next week.
Yeah, it was definitely not a godly relationship, not one we should have been living at the time, but we both had our reasons for being where we were at and had some stuff we needed to work through. And, obviously we wouldn't suggest what we did in our relationship to anybody else, but...
Doesn't excuse it, but the Lord has redeemed our story.
Exactly. It doesn't excuse what we did, but our story was thankfully redeemed. Kind of just a huge part of that was Kenzie finding her relationship with the Lord again and then bringing me in on that. And it was more of I'm not going to lose her, so it's time that I grow back up, and it's time I leave college life behind and realize what's for me outside of college. And so during senior year, made the change, came back to the Lord, found him truly in January. And, a little bit on my story, I guess. I grew up in church up until I left for college. And I always say I knew God, knew how to answer the questions of Bible school, knew how to pray the prayer for our guys group that we had for high schoolers, knew how to answer the questions. That way it wasn't just the group leaders sitting there tossing a question out in awkward silence and nobody answering it. I knew how to do all those things. I thought I knew God, and then never truly knew what a relationship with him looked like until 4 years later. Like, that's just one of those things that's so crazy to say, that you can sit there and grow up in a church and not know what God truly means in your life until he makes that impactful moment. And that's where I think that obviously our stories were not ideal, and we never suggest living a relationship that we live to anybody, but also it was something that we needed to go through at the time. Because if we did not go through it and I hadn't left, I'd still be sitting there possibly living the Christian life that I thought I knew to live, and basically just like doing the things, going to church, like leading a Christian life per se, and then never would have found myself out of college, and then also left that guy behind basically and truly found myself, is the way I kind of say it. So anyways, long story short, after finding God, realized that a marriage was not worth holding off for us, and that was the next step in our marriage, because relationship. I knew I wanted all of my future with her, and decided, if you want those things, why is marriage not your next step? So I did a little introspection and realized that it was my next step. Proposed in March, married in October.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jesus.
Finishing that leads into how the first couple months of marriage have gone for us. And
how have they gone for us? Care to share?
I think they've been pretty great, honestly. Obviously,
they have.
There's been learning curve, because you go, I lived with my dad when I left K-State, moved back to Kansas City, and I lived with him until I moved into our apartment where Kenzie was staying at for the time.
I've lived here for
1 year on the dot, basically.
1 year, but it was 10 months before he moved in.
Yeah.
So this place was definitely my apartment.
And I lived
until now. So combining those things has been interesting. It's been very humbling. This process has been very humbling. And I'm finding myself being humbled even in this conversation.
I mean, it's been it really has been good.
I was going to say that I think truly marriage has been the most beautiful thing that I've ever done in my life. And it is everything that I dreamed of and more. And I say more because what people say about it's hard, like they ain't lying when they say it, but it's cool because it's something that like
Yeah.
you're working hard for. And it's the most pruning, humbling relationship you can be in, coming from the way our relationship used to be to then switching it to then also living separately, obviously, and living together. You think you know somebody, and you do, but there's so many more things to learn about you and vice versa when you're married. And that's so beautiful. I think it's cool that getting to welcome him in like this and learning what that means from what this used to be my place and what I had jurisdiction over for 10 months to then welcoming him here and what that means for the both of us and allowing him to build a home here and cultivating that for both of us, not just me, and learning what that means. And it's still, every day is just a work in progress, but it's so cool. It's way more worth it than pursuing a dating relationship or an engagement. And it's also, you feel the weight of the covenant of marriage and what the Lord intended it to be. And honestly, I love that though there's still so much to learn and there's been stuff that has been harder to navigate, there's been so much sweetness and beauty, like I've said. Also, it's provided me like so much more confidence as a person or who I am. I'm so confident about our relationship, who I am as a person, just so much security. Like I don't have certain other things in life don't matter anymore. Like this is the most important thing to me. And I don't know, it's just very interesting how I wasn't necessarily prepared for that. I was like, all of a sudden, I just am more confident and just sure and secure. Now, the lies definitely still creep into my head. And this is probably another podcast episode, though, of like being a wife and what that entails and the lies that I've experienced in this season because they've been real, but still like finding security in like, I am your wife and I am learning and embracing this role. And like God has called me to be your wife and like having that security is just so cool.
Yeah. I mean, I think the biggest thing for me, you touched on a lot. We're doing a lot of learning in this phase, and especially as our first year of marriage continues on, we're going to continue to learn a lot about each other, and then in the years after that, we're going to grow as people and change as people. And something I kind of said to Kenzie before we got married, or right even when we got married, was it was actually one of my vows. It was that I vowed to accept who you are and grow with you and change with you, because I vowed that knowing that a person does not stay the same. You hear all the time in TV shows that relationship ending in a TV show, you've changed. You're not who you were when I fell in love with you. Well, duh. I mean, people grow, change, and things happen in life that make them act differently. And so instead of blaming that happens, what you do is you say, I'm going to continue to fight to learn to grow with you. We're going to sit here. I mean, obviously, one of the big growth areas we're going to hit is spiritual growth in our life. And that's going to possibly change parts of our personality.
Right.
As we grow older, it's gonna...
Who we were when you and I started dating, not even close to the same people we are now. And I hope we're not even close to the same people we'll be in the next 2 years.
I mean, I was full of wisdom. I just wasn't full of godly wisdom yet. I mean, now learning to love the person we grow into and not wishing that they were the person you originally fell in love with. Because that's something that's huge. I mean, as we continue to grow in our spiritual growth, spiritual wisdom, and then teach that to younger people, both as we get involved in youth groups and helping people learn that and navigate that, but then also having our kids one day to sit there and teach Jesus to and live a godly life with them and really, instill the word in them and help them understand what that really means. And that's going to kind of change how we act as well. because we're not going to be the same people we are right now at the start of our marriage in 5 years. There's not a chance.
Right.
But I guarantee you we're still going to love each other as much as we do right now, if not more.
More.
Yeah. Because that's just what a marriage does, is a marriage is a choice. Another thing I vowed, that a love like this is a privilege. It's not earned. It's not deserved. Nobody ever gets a love like this. Nobody ever deserves a love like this. And nobody ever just decides that they're going to one day choose a love like this. This is a love that is fought for. This is a love that is a privilege to have. This is something that takes work daily, takes conversation daily, and takes the will to want to learn about each other like this daily. Even when you're busy and even when life gets in the way, being able to sit down for a few minutes and just prove that in a day to the other person, and basically, as we call intentional living, showing intentional love to your spouse is huge.
And sacrificing what you might not consider being loved on. It's marriages a lot, and by no means am I perfect at this, but it's a lot of like sacrificing what I know will make you feel loved is not necessarily what would make me feel loved, and vice versa. Trying to do those things for each other. It's very sacrificial, and it honestly reminds me all of those things that you were saying is a true reflection of what our relationship with God should look like too.
Yeah.
It takes all of that work and all of those things too. And it's just so cool how we have to pursue our relationship with the Lord like that, and He pursues us like that. And then He's also given marriage as a gift to truly see that in a tangible way. It requires the same.
I mean, something that's huge for me that I've really, really instilled into myself over these past few months of marriage so far, that has just been a constant lesson to me, as I've got to sit here and learn a little bit into marriage and do it through a premarital course, and then also just through sermons about godly men and how that's supposed to look. It's godly men in a marriage are the most selfless people that you can possibly be for your wife. You will never prioritize yourself, and you will always prioritize your family. And that's something that could not be truer. Obviously, I'm not going to dive too deep into it because, gosh, it's a tangent to go off on. Huge thing of basically getting to sit down, and in a day on my drive to work, basically, I sit there and I know that in that day, I'm going to go to work, I'm going to come home, and then whatever I'm going to do at home, I'm going to do with the priority of doing it for my family. Basically, like, there's a song we've sang in worship before. It was At the Altar.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I kind of correlate those two things. There's always a need to fall at the altar. Even when you're in your best place spiritually, there's always a need to fall at the altar. There's always a need to be there. There's always a need to want that. And that can be, in my sense, it was I need to be selfless, and I need to selflessly put myself there and realize that, yes, I am the man of the household and I lead the family, but we as a family look to one leader in the household, and that's God. And that's something that's like, even though I might be who my family looks to, I'm also looking to somebody else for that answer too. Like, even with like my family looking to me for a decision, I'm not making that decision selfishly. I'm making that selflessly. And that's something that takes work and takes effort and takes surrendering and takes sacrificing and surrendering those selfish possible desires at the altar and leading a selfless life as a husband.
Yes. That's good stuff, babe.
Thank you. You kind of said your biggest lesson and biggest impact for the first 3 months of marriage. And that's been mine for sure. Like, that's been the thing. I've kind of said that to you a few times. That's what drops on my heart a lot, when it's like, if I can kind of start somewhere and continue to grow as a husband biblically, and this is kind of out there to anybody, you know, any ladies listening to this podcast, have this conversation with your men, and any men listening to this podcast, you know, possibly think about doing this. But that's one of those things that, like, if you want to lead that life as a godly husband and a godly man, I think that's the place to start more than anything. You know, we as men let selfish desires get in the way a lot of times, and being able to set those aside and help out your wife and help out your family one day when obviously we have more of a family. So then helping, like sacrificing your selfish desires and being selfless for your family, then that's like something that can go a long way and makes that impact in a marriage and shows growth and continues that and shows the intentionality of how I'm being intentional for her. And that's me putting my selfishness aside and saying, I wish I didn't have to clean this immediately. But then it's also realizing that she really loves coming home to a clean place and a clean home and not having to worry about it when she gets there. And so that's something that's, I realize that more, that even though I wish I could let it sit for maybe a couple hours and not have to deal with it right away, it's also easier for me to get it done right away because then I don't have to worry about doing it and she doesn't have to worry about doing it. So just kind of full circle right back around. So anyways, I mean, I think that covers it really well.
I love it when you talk, Jesus.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's good stuff. Thanks
Awesome.
for sharing that.
Of course. Thank you for sharing your position on how we've been doing so far.
I'd love to chat more too, because it's very
hear
interesting how much the Lord's pruning in my life when it comes to being a wife and what that means. Of also, it's been a tender spot with me and my flesh and the enemy too, of just getting in my head with.
I can sit here and talk biblical marriage as husband and wife position for a full hour and a half episode.
Which we will.
I'm sure we will. But
we will. That will be coming. Yep. But yeah, I think we'll wrap it today, but that was really good, babe. Thanks for being on again. Truly, I wouldn't have been able to start this without you because I've been scared out of my wit. So
I'm excited to see.
Appreciate it.
Excited to see your episode next week after this one of you just solo rolling it and getting to share your testimony and your story. I'm excited for it.
Yeah, thanks.
All right.
Thanks everybody for tuning in, and we will see you in next week's episode. Bye.